Welcome back to Project Command. I'm Captain Peter Younes, and today I'm honored to be joined by Alec Wons. He's the host of the Chief Exchange podcast, which is presented by Ready Rebound. And if you haven't come across the Chief Exchange yet, Alec sits down with fire chiefs and police chiefs from across the country to pull out those leadership lessons that actually matter. The hard-earned stuff about decision making, culture, resilience, and leading people when the stakes are real. Alec is also a first responder advocate and an author, and he's built a platform that connects leadership development with wellness and long game performance in public safety. Alec, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Peter. I'm excited for this, especially to be on the other end of the mic this time. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. Switch it up a little bit. Well, I got a lot of stuff I want to cover with you today, but before we get into all that, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got where you are?
yeah, I guess in a way, I feel like I'm a lifelong learner and always curious person. But the quick down and dirty on my background is from Kansas City, Missouri. Went to play college soccer at Marquette University, and during that time, got my degree in exercise physiology. So, actually, coming out of college, I was a strength and conditioning coach, working with guys in the NFL for their combine and off season. Before then running into the now CEO of Ready Rebound, David Reeves, and then the founder, Luis Rivera, who was a Marquette alum. And they became mentors to me and kind of explained what they were doing with first responders and helping them recover sooner, which really resonated with me because I had to stop playing college soccer my sophomore year due to getting arthritis in my foot at 21, which I was like, I thought this didn't happen to you like 60 or 70. So any dreams I had of playing, you went from just playing with your buddies and hoping to try and play professionally one day to all of a sudden being the manager and doing the laundry and ordering lunch. So it really made that you kind of open up, since that's what the 15 years of my life had been previously, was soccer.
Yeah.
And it at the time was really horrible, kind of like identity loss in a way, but now it's like the biggest blessing in disguise. And that's what kind of helped me get me out of that kind of sports world and realize there's a lot more to give. And after being with Ready Rebound for a year and finding that after college is I was talking with chiefs, first responders every day, and I was getting really frustrated with what I was seeing on the news, TV shows, movies, because it was not what was accurately in the day to day that you guys were living.
Hmm.
And even a little more on the policing side, it feels like even when they're doing the right thing, they're always at a disadvantage.
Yep.
So I wanted to start the Chief Exchange podcast as a way for the public to actually see what a career in public safety can be like that was unfiltered. I wanted chiefs to be able to connect with each other across the country to learn best practices from each other, because what you figured out in Enrico, someone hasn't figured out in Orlando, Florida. So why reinvent the wheel and someone else has already solved it? And then selfishly, I wanted to learn more, and I was really curious about the people who we're talking with. I'm not the kind of person who likes to just be super narrow in an area. I like to try and know anything and everything I can about it. So it's been almost 2 years now in January that it'll be um, running, and just amazing relationships and lessons learned that have been a result of that. So
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate a lot of the things you said there. It's interesting the way that the story of the fire service gets told, and it's really encouraging to hear that you want to tell that story because I think there is a really powerful story to tell that's kind of beyond the Chicago fire or whatever the newest one is. There's a story beyond that, and I really appreciate the fact that you care enough to dig in and find out what that story is. So thank you for the work you're doing there. And actually, I was wondering if you could tell, for people who don't know, if you could just tell us a little bit about Ready Rebound and kind of what the mission there is.
yeah, so Ready Rebound is just treating an injured firefighter police officer like they're a professional athlete. I mean, this is really timely right now. I'm from Kansas City. The Chiefs just got punted out of the playoff contention, and to add insult to injury, Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL.
I saw that game. Tough break, man.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of kind of what we do though in sports medicine. Is right now Mahomes is going to get imaging and see ortho same day, next day, and then if he's going to need surgery, he's getting it done that week.
Yeah.
Right now, we're seeing with first responders across the country, it's like let's try 6, 8, 10 weeks of PT before you're going to get imaging done and see an ortho, and then it's months down the line before you're even getting surgery, which doesn't help the injured first responder. It doesn't help staffing. It doesn't help overtime. Nobody wins. So all we're doing is treating an injured first responder like a professional athlete to get them into that same appointment timeline of getting treatment same week and next week to get them back on the road to recovery, and almost giving them that like Disney fast pass, if you will, to getting in to see the best providers in the area. So it's super fulfilling. And especially what I went through with my injury is like I don't want anybody else to have to suffer through that, especially the people who are protecting the communities that we live in.
Yeah, well, that's an incredible mission and very much needed. I know a lot of people in my organization that, a very similar story to the one you just told. They'll get hurt, and it's interesting you mentioned that loss of identity. I do see that with a lot of these long-term injuries. Firefighters have this, and police to some extent, I'm sure, have this sort of like, bulletproof persona, and we go into fires and we do all this stuff. And so when you get that really debilitating 6 or 9 or 12 month injury and you're bouncing around from specialist to specialist, yeah, I mean, that's that can really take a toll on people's mental health. So I think that's a really valuable service that you guys are providing.
Thank you. Yeah, I've never had whenever I was growing up, and because they have so many people, it seems like it's kind of rare to talk to someone who really loves what they do. And I never
Yeah,
thought you could love work as much as this, almost like play. So I'm
yeah,
very fortunate. And it's not like I ever grew up with like a public safety background either. So for those listening, it's not like I was a firefighter or police officer. Um, Opportunity is a strange beast sometimes when it comes knocking, and you can never really predict to meet the people who would change your life or the opportunities that would come your way. So
yeah. And so, well, first of all, thank you for that. That's thank you again, first of all, for the mission, and also just for taking the time to explain that to us. And then, just the last thing I want to ask about that, for those out there who maybe aren't as familiar with what does it mean to be a first responder advocate? From your perspective, what does that mean to be an advocate for first responders?
yeah, my way, it's almost to how am I there to support them in the daily activities they're doing? How am I advocating on their behalf? So, for example, I'm getting my hair cut one day in the city, and one of the hairdressers overhears that I work with police and fire departments. And one of them was like, "Oh, you work with police officers, huh?" And that just immediately like gives a little sting for you. And like
Yeah,
inside, like you're like you can feel the flame start to burn a little bit. And then externally, like, oh, like, well, what do you mean by that?
hmm,
And it's like, well, they abuse their power. They do all this, just like a rant, almost like a defund the police person in there. And just listening to hear the thing. And I was like, I mean, that's an interesting perspective. And I was like, when you look at any industry, let's look at sales, let's look at restaurants, look at retail, anywhere you want, wherever you look for a bad apple, you'll find it in that
yeah,
industry. Nobody's perfect, and I hate when everyone gets painted with that broad brush, and it just seems to be an easy scapegoat, especially in public safety. I mean, you're under the microscope a lot, and my thing is, I know a lot of chiefs, I know a lot of first responders. I'm personal friends with them. I go get dinner with them. I go for walks. Like it's this true work life harmony for me that I'm fortunate to know so many of them, their families, and it's the most selfless thing that you can do is leaving that day knowing that you might not come back. Your family knows you might not come back, and constantly living on that. When I empathize and put myself in those shoes, I'm like, if I'm the person who can help make a change in an area or help, I want to do it. So
yeah.
it's been really helpful to do that.
Yeah, well, I know that and I'm not a police officer, but I have a lot of friends that are, and I'm sure they would say that that's important work. I think the thing about that is, and I was in our training section. I was the lieutenant of our training academy, which is it's a 36-week academy that we put on for our new hires full time. And one of the things we teach is stress inoculation, and that's basically, we create these artificial situations that are very, very stressful, and we basically throw everything at them, and then ask them basic questions like what's 5 plus 5, what's 2 times 3, basic questions, but under tremendous stress. And the idea there is get people to think like who was the first president of the United States, who was the first, anything. And one of the things that I discovered in going through that is, a lot of times I feel like we talk about police training, police training, police training, and we forget that you can give a fire. I'll just talk about firefighters. You can give an entry level firefighter the absolute best class on stress inoculation, but for them to think clearly in a stressful situation where lives are on the line takes years of practice. It's not something you can just teach. You have to really practice it. And I think, I feel like police are often in a situation where you have a 2 or 3 year police officer who's had the right training, but you just got to get those reps in, and you find yourselves in these situations where you have to make these split second decisions. And yeah, the training's there, but this is just something you have to practice for years to get good at it.
No, it's a great. I mean, it just relates to sports of like repetition is the mother of skill. You train, you
Yeah.
train, you train. So it's just second nature at that point. You do have to be able to make a split second decision. And I was talking with a chief recently. It's like preparation is the job.
Yeah,
It's constant training, you're
well said.
reacting. And the hard thing is I went to a conference last year. It was like the Curve conference, which is a reform on policing and helping middle level managers. And it's a really great initiative, but they had a SEAL come in and speak. And he was like, man, it's really interesting how everybody kind of idolizes the military when we're going into a mission well equipped. We know what time we do, we know the date, we know the weather, we know all these things about the mission that we're doing. But when you're in the fire service, when you're in policing, you're getting called not knowing what's on scene.
Yeah.
So now it's helpful to see drones kind of getting there before so you can kind of have an idea of what you're walking into, but you don't know time, day, what the situation is going to be like. I mean, there's sometimes you've ever seen the news of ambushes. You just have no idea what you're walking into. Um,
Hmm. Yeah. Well, very well said. Preparation is the job. I like that. I might have to borrow that one. Well, Alec, I wanted to switch a little bit now, and I want to talk about culture in the fire service and a little bit of context for that. I feel like the vantage point that you have, where you're coming at it from an outsider's perspective, you have a really interesting and unique background in sports and sports medicine and working with professional sports, and then you shift into this, and now you have this opportunity where you're interacting with so many different chiefs, hearing about what they've got going on, talking to them about their organization and the organizational culture. So, from that vantage point, I just wanted to get your high level thoughts on where is firefighter culture right now, and what's the state of it? I know that's sort of a meta question, but just go wherever you want with that one.
Yeah, no, I definitely will. And yeah, just as a precursor to say it again, is I was not previously in the fire service or in
Mm,
policing. So all this stuff is just that I've been able to kind of gather and really look through the information of interviewing. It'll be almost 100 chiefs now over the last couple
wow,
of years, which is super
amazing.
fun. But we're talking about culture. It's a really interesting part of an organization because when I was talking with Ron Canterman, who's an executive fire inspector at FDNY, he's been in the fire service for almost 50 years. And he has one quote that is just like branded onto my brain, almost like when you did it's like a cattle, was just operations move at the speed of trust.
Amazing. I love it. I listened to that
It
episode.
doesn't,
Such a good
it's,
episode, by the way.
and first of all, his accent is just great. So it just makes the episode even better at that point.
Totally. Totally.
But it doesn't
Everyone
matter.
listening, go listen to that episode. If you're just going to listen to one episode of the Chief Exchange, go listen to that episode. It's a really, really good one.
And if you're in New York, ask him a good place to eat. There's a really good sandwich spot like right around the corner from FDNY too.
It's good to know. File that away. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
No, you're good. Feel free. I get excited sometimes, so feel free to pop in and dive into it. But it doesn't matter. Like some of these chiefs I'll talk with, they create the best strategic plan. Everything on paper looks fantastic. But if you don't have the culture
Mm,
to adopt it, and culture is a broad word, so even if you like look to chunk that up a little bit, is it's when you have initiative in place, do people believe you? Do people follow you? Do they believe in the vision you've set for the organization? And that sometimes depends on, are you a person who's come up internally through the ranks and you have everyone's respect, which can be easier? Or sometimes there's a new chief who comes in, and sometimes that is needed for a little bit of a culture shock, depending on what it's like in a department and come in to make change at that point. Um, it really is dependent, but that's one of the biggest things I've seen is it doesn't matter how much you plan for. If people don't have trust or believe that you have what's in the best interest of them individually and as the group of a whole or the community, it's really hard to adopt that plan. And a lot of the culture stuff, it's when you say it, it sounds simple, but it's a lot harder in practice. And a lot of the stuff I've seen from chiefs is it does take a little more time, but it's how do I create this open door policy where people have ideas and I encourage them to come in and share ideas. I might not agree with all of them,
yeah.
probably not going to adopt a lot of them, but at least they feel heard and that they're contributing to a solution at that point. Because I think right now, I mean, when you look in the fire service, it's kind of like a paramilitary organization, if you will, with rank structure. And I'd even have some chiefs who are like, just call me by my name,
Yeah.
not even necessarily my rank. Because when you leave the fire service or policing, it's I'm not chief. I mean, that becomes someone's identity sometimes, which can be really unhealthy at that point. So it's we're all people, and I simply just view it as like sports. We're all people on the same team. We have to work together to be able to help accomplish the mission of the game, and we're called out onto it. It's just how do you create that cohesive environment? Because
Hmm.
I know there's sometimes there's cliques that develop, there's bullying in the fire service, and how you just root some of that out. So I know that was kind of a little bit of a little sporadic there.
No, it
I
was
mean, even one of
perfect.
the
I asked you a very
yeah.
broad question, and you gave me a great answer on it. Well, to kind of build off of that, what have you seen any, you've done, you said, I think 100 or over 100 interviews. Have you seen any consistent trends? Like, man, every chief talks about this, or every chief is talking about this. What have you seen that's a consistent trend in fire service leadership?
Yeah, there's two that come to mind right off the bat is everyone is a lifelong learner.
Hmm.
And out of 100 interviews now, I think there's only been one chief who said when they started out they wanted to be chief, which
Interesting.
means that the other 99 did not have aspirations to be chief, did not think that it was in reach. A lot of times they saw who was going to be put in at that point when they could have had a chance to run. They're like, I don't want to work for that person.
Yeah.
Or they felt like it was time to pay it forward, but they always just did the best job of where they were at and whatever role they were given to them as they were coming up through the ranks. They embraced it, even though sometimes they didn't like it. People do not really like to go into internal affairs,
Yeah.
but when you get into administration at that point, it's something that's really helpful into your tool belt. So I think a big thing is if you're someone who's coming up through the ranks is you can't always see um, what the chief or what the leader organization has seen themselves. They have a different higher viewpoint and know what they've experienced. So sometimes it is just trusting them. Like in the moment, you might not see why it's going to pay off, but in the future, um, it does. And another thing to build off on the culture piece and kind of tying it back into sports, just a really firm believer that the championship is won the draft. So a
Hmm.
lot of it too is who are the people that you're bringing into your organization because it was your parents' job to teach you values, morals, and that stuff. If you bring someone who doesn't necessarily have those, it can really tear up even the greatest cultures that are built.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard a quote that I liked. Culture eats tactics. I think that's what it was, or maybe it was culture eats strategy. In any case, yeah, I
Eats
think that
both.
yeah, it eats both. It's very hungry. Yeah, interesting. Very well said. Cool. What about challenges? Have you, because, and to preface this, I like to talk a lot about project management, which we can get into, but I have this thesis that we're all managing the same projects. Everybody's trying to roll out new equipment, everybody's trying to implement new software, everybody's designing new fire stations, everybody's specing out a new ladder truck. So I feel like we're all doing the same projects, and I just wonder, have you found that we're all kind of running into the same issues or problems?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether it's a volunteer fire department or you're looking at FDNY, one of the largest agencies in the world. Everyone's seeing the same challenges, just on a somewhat different scale.
Hmm.
I mean, it's really easy. Just human nature is easy to point out the problems or challenges. The fun thing that's more unique is okay, how do we turn this into an opportunity or
Yeah.
to a solution? So that's one thing for everyone here is if you're going to raise a problem, you better also present a solution with it. But some of the stuff that I've been seeing from interviews and then just traveling around the country is, I mean, there's decrease in applicants, there's burnout from staffing challenges, there's budget cuts of how am I doing more with less? Maybe part of the answer is doing less with less to a certain extent. You can only cut so much and
Yeah.
still maintain a certain level of service. I mean, it's no surprise of the increase in apparatus costs, let alone the times now it's actually taking to get back to those.
Totally.
Looking at wellness stuff of heart disease, cancer, mental health, suicide. I mean, those are the three biggest reasons why firefighters right now are leaving this world too early at that point in time. Um, Divorce rates in public safety are extremely high. So, how do you maintain good communication with your spouse and family so that you can help reduce the likelihood that happens and not become a part of that statistic? Like another one too is firefighters benefit hopping. I mean, used to see a couple, one or even 2 decades ago, is someone would start at one department, work their whole career, they'd retire. Now you're seeing some resumes where it's they'll hop through a couple different departments, or they'll be in the service for 5 years and then just leave, which wasn't always seen.
Yeah.
And I think one of the last ones too is, and I'll speak since it's part of my generation, if you will, and what I've seen is maybe more of a work-life balance is what people are
Yeah.
wanting and not necessarily gobbling up the overtime shifts that they used to.
Hmm.
So I know that's kind of ratting off a lot, but that's a lot of the common themes that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, actually, can I dig in on that last one? Because I think
Yeah.
that I talked about that with another guest I had on recently. That I'm so optimistic about this new generation that's coming into the workforce. I know that they get, some people are frustrated about the kind of the overtime thing, like, and oh, they're lazy, they don't want to work. And, I think there's such a connection between the mental health and having good personal boundaries or wanting a work-life balance. And I think generations previously were much less capable or willing to set those boundaries and just say, look, I'm not willing to do that on overtime. I don't want the $1,000 I'll get from a 24-hour shift or the whatever. I'd rather, go to this festival, or I'd rather hang out with my kids or whatever. And um, I think that's so healthy. I really think that's so healthy. And I know that it's a challenge for fire service administration to fill the seats. And I understand that that's obviously critical, but to tie into the firefighter mental health and well-being, I just think that's such a positive development. I wonder what you think about that.
I see both. So it's I've always been like a personal like workhorse myself when it comes to some of these things. So some of the part is just like when you know what you're running towards, you will follow it. Um, and I think it depends on the person because I still meet younger people today who want to be the ones to be able to eat it up. But I don't know if it's just a change in generation, a change in technology, other career options being available that offer more flexibility in family life. So there's more optionality. Um, but I almost like to look at it more of like a work-life harmony at that point rather than balance between the two because your work is your life and your life is part of your
Hmm.
work as well. And when you spend at least a third, half to two-thirds sometimes of your life working, it's like I'd rather enjoy it. So I see both sides, and it really just comes down to me of what's important to the individual. I do see once you have a family and you want to be there for your kids and stuff, I can totally see how you want to be able to spend more time and do that there. And there's a lot of Chiefs who I've talked with who they've achieved amazing things throughout their career, but they had to sacrifice a lot of things. There was missed games, there was missed birthdays,
Yeah.
there was not being there. So I think what it really comes down to is what's important to you because we're all on this floating rock through space for a very short period of time. And it's how do you want to kind of spend that time while you're here? And it shouldn't be a judgment either way. Um, Whether it's something you really want to pursue or you're like, no, I'm good where I'm at. And part of that too is if that's where your organization is as a leader, how do I help empower my people so I can still have them? Because just because people want to work less, it doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them lazy or anything like that. Because if they're there for the time they're assigned and they do great, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it does require this dialogue, I think.
Well, and I think also there's a recognition that I think there used to be a conflation of time with effort. Like the more time you spent working on something, the better it was. And I think this new generation, having seen what AI can do for the volume of their work or the velocity of their work and other things like that, they no longer make that same conflation where it's just like, look, I've got to work myself to death to be a good firefighter. And I wonder, maybe it's just maybe that's just sort of the where we are with technology and where our broader culture is. But yeah, in any case, I think I'm very optimistic about the generation coming into the workforce now. And I know it's kind of you know fashionable to kind of dump all over the new generation, but yeah, I don't feel that way. So it's interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Um, but I want to pivot from there a little bit, and this is kind of related. With that in mind, with the challenges that we see facing fire service leadership and the opportunities, what do you see as the big differentiator between high performing leadership teams and maybe not as high performing leadership teams?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Depending on the organization you're with, is sometimes whoever gets to the top is there for 5, 10, 15, 20, like is there for sometimes decades. And when you look at the tenure of most chiefs, sometimes it's normally an average around maybe 5 years, if you will. And in certain military parts of the organization, you get your 1 or 2 years in this position and then you're done. It's nothing against you personally. You could be doing great, but it's just this constant evolution of what's going on. So some of the best leaders that I've seen is they hire their command staff around them. They hire people who are better than them, who are smarter than them, who are more educated than them, especially in their specific area. Because it's like I can't be the jack of all trades and do everything right. I can only hold a certain amount of plates at one time before I start dropping them. So I think the idea of a leader is to delegate is and maybe delegate. Some people might not like that word or not, but it's how do I be able to I'll use the word delegate for the sake of the conversation since I can't think of a better word right now. But how do I give these responsibilities to other people so that they can help grow the organization, that they can be more autonomous, and I can kind of be more of the person at the top, kind of overseeing how all of the pieces are coming together at that point.
Hmm.
And there's people you see who don't want to hire because they're threatened by other people who might take their job, and that's the wrong mindset to have because it's not about you as a leader, it's about the organization, how you're empowering people who are coming up. And sometimes that's sad to see because the way I view it is almost like how a bunch of elephants, how they travel together is one of their trunks is holding the other person's tail at that point. So they're all in a big line. And if you look at anybody who got to the top of an organization or is doing really great things, you got there by standing on the shoulders of giants at that point in time and learning from those. And it's your job to pay it forward
Yeah.
at that point for the next organization. So, I mean, really great conversation I had with Chief Michael West, who was the chief of Front Range Fire in Colorado, is when we interviewed, he believed he still had 5 more years in him to be the chief, but where his command staff was, where the board was, where the organization was as a whole, he believed he was actually holding back those coming up through the ranks, the organization, by not letting those other ones kind of take the reins, which was a really interesting
Hmm.
perspective to have. And I mean, some chiefs too. I mean, it's no surprise that application rates are a little lower than they used to be a decade or two ago. And sometimes you had almost getting the role as a firefighter was like getting a Willy Wonka golden ticket
Oh yeah.
at that point in time. And some of the most respected chiefs I've seen is like, you know what, like we are having more overtime right now. We're not seeing some applicants we want. We are a couple positions short staffed, but I'm not going to put the wrong butt in the seat here because that does a lot more harm than good
Yeah.
um,
Totally.
at that point in time.
Yeah, that's totally right. I'm sure you've had, interviews that stood out to you and you probably thought, and this guy's got it figured out. Are there any that come to mind that you just think like, man, that was a really thoughtful leader or an inspiring leader?
Yeah, it's maybe just because it's maybe recency bias here, but Chief Chris Tubbs of Southern Marin Fire, he used to be at Mercer Island Fire in Washington, Southern Marin Fires in Marin County in California, and he was the former Cal Chiefs president. Just amazing person. One of some
Hmm.
of the things that he talked about with his team was, I think when they were doing like tablet command, is they were going between two different options, and he brought his all team in together, and it says, "Which one do you guys want?" And a lot of people are like kind of blown away. Like, you care about our opinion? He's like, well, you guys are going to be the ones using it. Chief was fine with either option, so it's giving your team optionality. So if I let them choose, they can't be mad with the decision we make, no matter what it is. So I think as a leader, if I can give options A, B, and C, where I'm fine with whatever outcome, but whichever one the team chooses, they're that much more bought into because now they're the ones who stated that, which was amazing at that point. Another thing he did that I thought was fantastic is he's a really big fan on public value
Hmm.
and how, I mean, we are paid by the community. So how do we take what they want and be able to deliver it to them, just like in customer service at that point in time? If I'm going to Chick-fil-A to get a sandwich, they're going to listen to customer feedback to make it better so you keep coming back. But one of the things that he did was put out a survey to the community he served and asking, what level of service do you guys want? And if there was a discrepancy, then there was a gap between what funding allowed them to do and where they wanted to be. He would then put out on the next ballot a tax measure as, hey, here's what you guys all want. Here's what we can do based on what we're given in order to be able to reach this next level. We would need X amount, much more funding, whether it's going to come from a tax or something else. But at that point, then it's coming from the community. So I think it's this really great thing of having this idea, giving it to your team to toss around, and then be able to come back. So, and then
Hmm.
just great human in general
Yeah.
too. So,
And it's interesting when people, because I think that, good or bad Chiefs, I think everyone kind of got the message. Yeah, you gotta at least ask your people what they want. But I think one of the things I've seen is people really can, and I don't even know the right way to describe this, but they can perceive authenticity very well. Um, even if you're not a particularly perceptive person, I just think when and I'm thinking about an interview I did with the deputy chief of Westminster, Colorado, Eric Lindenberger, and you can just
mm-hmm.
feel that authenticity when he talks. You're just like, I believe this guy, I believe him, and he talks about how proud he is of his community and how proud he is of the firefighters that work for him, and and you can feel it. And so I think to your point, when you have that chief that is asking you, hey, what do you guys think about this? And it doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel astroturfed. It's like I actually believe that he cares about my opinion and he's going to listen. And maybe he won't do exactly what I say, but he's going to hear me out. And so, yeah, I think that people really can detect true authenticity.
I was able to see him in person 2 times this year when I was in Colorado. Him and Chief Burke are running a great organization in Westminster. It's really cool too, like the mutual aid system they've developed with the departments and counties nearby.
Hmm.
If anybody gets a chance to talk to them, or I haven't listened to that episode specifically, but if Eric put something out there, it's definitely worth listening to. So
Yeah, he's great. Um, cool. So, and any other big takeaways that you can think of from some of the other chiefs that you can, if not, you've already shared a bunch, but any other kind of big leadership nuggets that you can think of?
there's one of them. It was almost like the 70% rule of,
Hmm. What's that?
I mean, when you're given information, right? Like nothing is ever 100% certain in life. Some of the best leaders I've seen are the ones who, when you have 60 to that around 70% of information, you make the decision with what you have, knowing that you can course correct along the way. I
Hmm.
think there's other leaders I've seen who they try and wait to have all their ducks in a line, which is totally fair as you want to have as many in line as possible. But then at one point, we've all done this in our lives, is you start to embark down that path and you learn more as you go and just be willing to kind of build the plane as you fly it and course correct. And sometimes you'll make one or two mistakes, but then you're where you want to be. I think sometimes so many people get stuck in this planning phase. They want to start this initiative, but they don't feel like they have every single piece to the puzzle, then will hold out. So I'm not telling people to rush through decisions, but that's why it's even more important to have a team who supports your vision and being vulnerable with that is, hey, we're going to do this thing. I have the 70% of information. I'm going to need you guys' other help filling in the 30% as we go.
Hmm.
So those are some of the best leaders I've seen too, is being vulnerable, which it can be viewed as a soft word by some people, but when you hear how Brene Brown talks about it, is being vulnerable is courageous, and that's how some
Yeah.
of the best leaders I've seen is. This is not just me steering the ship. This is a we. I mean, this all this together.
Well, that ties in perfectly with the quote that you love and that I also love, the operations move at the speed of trust, because if you trust your team, you can operationalize a 70% plan, and if you don't, then you probably can't. Yeah, I love that. I heard a quote that I really liked. Who was it? It was Reid Hoffman, the guy founder of LinkedIn. He said, "If
Mm-hmm.
you are not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you waited too long to roll it out," or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but I really liked that. That actually found that kind of inspiring. So that's really cool. I like that. I'm gonna think more on that. The 70% rule. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, yeah, just it's not telling people to rush, but it's like,
Hmm.
I mean, when you make a decision on scene, right, you're making a decision with the information that you
Yeah.
have present. You're not going to know everything. And that's what Chiefs do too, is I can't foresee everything that's going to happen. I try and map it out, but at some point too, we just have to go with what we have.
Yeah, and it's kind of about having that like that bias for action. I
Yeah.
think like you're saying, very rarely are you going to have 100% of the information, but I think organizations that have their reflex is let's operationalize this. I think they tend to do a little bit better, in the long term. That's really cool.
Hmm.
I like that. Yeah, very well articulated. Also, well, one thing I wanted to run by you, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit before on our phone call, but I'm really interested in project management in the fire department, and I have this, I've kind of gone down that rabbit hole for the last few years, and I've been researching it pretty extensively, and I think that if you have a fire department and you take out the 911 calls, what you're left with is programs, projects, processes, and systems. So systems like
Hmm.
Telestaff or something like that, or Image Trend, and programs like a paramedic program or a QA program, or processes like ISO or accreditation. And so it's so important, and all those have to start as a project because they have to be rolled out, they have to be trained on and communicated, and policies have to be written. And so getting good projects, or put differently, getting work done the right way is so critical. And I know that your focus is a lot on leadership and culture. And I just wonder, in your travels, have you come across any interesting ways that organizations are getting work done or organizing projects, or even just the culture that they create around getting projects done? And one more thing I'll say on that, I thought Chief Brian Marcos of Georgia, Smyrna, Georgia, had a really interesting thought on that, which is that his organization has created a culture where if you come and you have a good idea and it's well researched and it's well thought out, you're going to get some traction by and large. And I just wonder, kind of a long question here, but I just wonder, what have you seen in that vein in your travels?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Just from my perspective, what I've seen is obviously each organization has their own version of a strategic plan as it's coming through. Is what are our top 1 to 3, 1 to 5 things that we're really wanting to look at this year. And when you can tie your initiative into one of those things for the organization or the city as a whole, or if it's coming from your district, what the board is wanting, it has a lot greater likelihood of getting put in. It's not that if it gets denied, it's not because it's a bad idea at that point. But like I said, you can only work on so many projects at one point in time. So like you
That's
said,
right.
if we do remove the 911 calls, there's only a certain amount of bandwidth that we have. And I've done this in aspects of my life where you have your hands in like multiple jars, you're doing multiple things, and you really realize you're not getting far in any one. But if you cut off maybe half the stuff you're doing and allocate those time and resources to the main rocks or chunks, if you will, that helps take care of some of the other stuff. So I think you can tie into what's good for the broad organization of a whole. Obviously, do your planning, do your research, tie it to your initiatives, the people who create a strategic plan. You have a lot greater likelihood of doing it and
Mm.
gaining buy-in and making it collective rather than that's something I've learned even within my own organizations. It's a really good idea, but maybe we just need to pin that
Yeah.
for a little bit right now and not get distracted by the shiny keys or the lady in the red dress, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. I like the lady in the red dress. Yeah, that's so true because, man, with firefighters, our eyes are often bigger than our stomach when it comes to projects. And, we just, because I think firefighters are typically a really thoughtful and resourceful group of people. I mean, that's resourceful is the name of the game. You go to a call and it just, like you said, you don't know what you're going to get and you get there and you have to sort it out and you can't leave until it's sorted out. There is no team, there's no other team that's going to come in. You are the plan B. And so I think because of that, it sort of, it creates this sense of resourcefulness. And so because of that, when firefighters see problems, that resourceful part of the brain kicks in and they go, well, let me solve this problem. And so a lot of times we tend to take on more than we can manage, and that leads to projects dying on the vine or that feeling of you're drowning. And so yeah, I think I like that. That's really thoughtful.
Yeah, I mean, if you are heading a team or organization, you do want that from your team. You want them bringing solutions. You want them raising problems since they're the ones who are in the trenches each day, if you will.
Yeah.
But then, as Brian Marcos does a really great job of showing, is like you have to like map out your calendar. So maybe let's say if when's a good time to revisit this project? And I'm a huge fan of this is something I had shifted internally. It makes all the difference, whether it's verbal or nonverbal communication or written in email, just subbing out the word, getting rid of the word but, and then putting in the word and. Like,
Hmm.
this is a really great initiative, but we're not going to look at it right now. It's like, this is a really great initiative, and I want to be able to table this to next year so we can allocate more resources towards it. So it just, your words really do matter, especially when you're talking to your team and like that, because you don't want that but could be what makes them never want to come to you again for something that's actually really important at that point
Yeah.
in time.
Yeah. I love that. Including and. The other word I heard, I think it was, I went to a presentation my wife did. She's an ER doctor and she put on a presentation some time ago and she was talking about the word yet and how, I think that was a Brene Brown thing, how powerful the word yet is. Like, I can't do this yet, or we can't figure this out yet. And just putting
Mm-hmm.
that yet at the end of the sentence is such a game changer. And I like that. And I'll have to include that one as well.
Mm-hmm. I like that one too. I haven't heard that one before, so I'm gonna start using that in my day to day too.
Yeah, nice. Well, Alec, I got one more thing that I want to talk to you about, and it's a little bit broad. It's very meta, like a lot of the other questions I've asked today. So, feel free to go whatever direction you want with it. But, you've got a really, impressive array of things you've done, a really broad, sort of diverse group of experiences you have from college sports, your college education, your early career, what you're doing now. I just wonder if you could share some of the things, I don't want to call them like, keys or tips to success, but what are some of the things that you've learned along the way that if you could jump into a time machine, you would tell, a younger Alec Wons, hey, don't forget this or keep this in mind. What are some things that you think you've picked up along the way that you'd want to share with people that are listening to this right now?
Yeah, no, that's a great. There's so many things. Because a lot of my just now like personal friends who are some of those people I obviously work with is they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So I've always kind of felt like an older soul. And growing up, you kind of like, oh, like I think I know better. So that's just kind of being the ignorance piece.
Yeah.
Then I think the definition of being smart is trial and error. Like, okay, I'll kind of trust but verify. And now it's not tooting my own horn, but you're trying to embrace the more wisdom side of this, where how can I learn from the scars, mistakes, experiences of others so I don't have to kind of experience that
Hmm.
same pain, loss, whatever you will at that point in time. So it's finding multiple people who are kind of in different aspects of life of kind of where you want to be. So maybe you have a family friend who's been married for 50 years and you're kind of starting a relationship. Talk to that person about what was successful, what was not successful. If you're in a leader of an organization, whether it's your CEO or your firefighter, talking with your deputy chief of, hey, when you were in my position, like what's something that you would recommend to someone who wants to get here?
Hmm.
The big and people love passing that information back down, and amazing relationships result from it. So I'd say just find the things in other people that you kind of aspire to be like, and go reach out to them, talk to them. And if for some reason they don't want to talk to you, there's these things called books that people have lived 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years of life that's consolidated down into 200 pages where it's like the ultimate cliff notes, and it's a one-sided conversation obviously since they're not in the room, but just continually
Hmm.
learning is what I would tell everyone. Just always be curious, always be learning. And when it comes to relationships, is build relationships before you need them. That's another really good one I
Well,
heard from Chiefs, especially when it comes to counsel. It's like when it comes time to budget each year, don't just come knocking on my door and you need money. It's how do we have regular lunch meetings throughout a month? Bring you out to the fire ground so you can see what we're doing, what we're working on, and you be more of a relationship, not just this kind of give and
hmm.
take from each other.
Wow. That second one I love. I really love that. That's great. Have you, by chance, speaking of books, have you read the book Range by chance? It's by a guy, David Epstein is his last name. Kind of an unfortunate last name there, but
Yeah.
the the book's called Range, and I tell everybody about it. It's like it's quite literally the best book I've ever read in my life. I highly, highly recommend it. I'd recommend it to anybody. It actually legitimately changed my life. But one of the things I think is so cool, and the subtext or the subtitle is why generalists win in a world of specialization. But
Mm.
one of the big things I got from it was, and I'm of course paraphrasing to the extreme, but you never know where that next good idea is going to come from. And I think what I got from that book is it gave me permission to be interested in things that I couldn't draw a direct link to what I was doing now. Like history, for example. I just am obsessed with history, all of it. All of it. I'll read anything. And I always felt a little bit guilty where I was just like, man, I should be reading about, I don't know, fire department tactics or project management, or whatever. And this book kind of was talking about how some of the best, most innovative ideas have come from a field completely unrelated to where the idea took hold. And I've found that in my life. I remember it's so totally random, but I was reading about um, the Attila the Hun and the Hun army and how it was able to move so quickly because they didn't have supply lines, and so they were able to move very, very quickly. And so that was their advantage initially, but it was also their undoing because they got very, very far along and they couldn't stay in one place for very long because they would consume all of the resources and then they would have to move along. So they couldn't stay in a city or stay anywhere, and so they were vulnerable for that reason. And I was running a project. It was this huge project, and I realized that we had, in order to move quickly, we had kind of set aside traditional things that a project would have. But as a result of that, it meant that we were vulnerable and that we were sucking up all of the organization's resources. And it was interesting. I saw like a parallel where I just probably wouldn't have thought there was one. And so, anyways, I kind of went off on a tangent here, but I love that book because it essentially gives you permission to read whatever you like, not knowing where that next great idea is going to come from. I can't even remember why I started telling you about this, but yeah, great book. I think you'd really enjoy it.
No, I'll write it down. And I couldn't agree more with what you said. And I would even go as far as to argue that your best ideas for work come when you're not working. It's when you're
Hmm.
exploring, when you give your mind to kind of be out of that environment, you can think a little more freely and creatively. I mean, there's great things in customer service to take away from Chick-fil-A, to take away from Disney. I mean, one of my favorite books is to give you one back is Unreasonable Hospitality by Will
What's it
Guidara.
called?
As unreasonable hospitality. And the brief cliff notes is this guy was the owner of a restaurant called 11 Madison Park in New York. And one of the things that he did was just absolutely delight customers, make this as an experience. And one of the things that he did is this. It was a Chinese family came in, had a great week in New York, and they were about to leave on a flight that evening after their meal. And like, man, the one thing we didn't get to do was have like a street hot dog, like authentic New York. So he goes out and buys a hot dog and he plates it and brings it out as like their appetizer, and they lost it. It's like it does not take this earth-shattering
Mm.
gesture, this big grand party to make someone's day. It's just simply hearing someone, meeting them where they're at, and just kind of delighting them, which could be smiling at someone, it could be opening a door. It's just, especially like public safety, there's so many interactions where people, it's like, I need to have a great relationship with the public so that we can function together. And it's those little actions that compound over time that make the biggest difference in the community. But that, like you said, that was from the restaurant industry.
Hmm.
So always explore other things. I think like, you try and be a generalist in a lot of things because you start to connect some crazy dots. So I love where you went with that.
Yeah. Well, I will check that out. You can count on that. Well, last thing here, Alec, if people are interested in what they've heard you talking about, I mean, obviously we talked a little bit about your podcast, but where can people go if they want to hear some more of the things you're working on or more of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the easiest way to reach out to me. And then each week I post a new podcast on there, and I have clips that come out each day from highlights and conversations where I've had with chiefs. So all the stuff I've talked about today, it's stuff that has come from my learning, reading, and conversations with other people. And I'm a big fan of sharing information that seems really helpful to the masses at that point in time. So Alec Wons on LinkedIn is a really easy way to be able to connect if you want to have a further conversation, or just kind of be able to join along the ride and kind of learning from those people who've already made the mistakes in life and are trying to better themselves and growing. So
Can I challenge you with one last question? Sorry, I keep saying last question.
I love a good
I swear
challenge. Let's do
this really is it.
it.
If you're listening to if for everyone listening to this right now, if they're going to just listen to one episode of your podcast, which episode do you want them to listen to?
Oh man, that's a
I
hard
know
one.
this is totally putting you on the spot. I apologize, but I just I like to know where to start if I'm going to start a new podcast. What's the episode you'd
Mm.
recommend?
And maybe it's just because the one that came out this week when I was re-listening to it. But I really do love the one with Chris Tubbs. I mean, obviously, we talked about before about how I gain buy-in from my team, different initiatives have been on. But another really good thing um, that he had kind of just mentioned, and now I'm even drawing a blank on what it was. Oh no, it was providing public value. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're looking at public safety, is how am I providing? Like, what does it mean to provide values? Is an even bigger thing at that point. And taking his education from his naval postgraduate school, from
Hmm,
the Harvard Kennedy School, I probably butchered that one a little bit,
I think that's right.
but we covered so many things in his experience at Cal Chiefs and how they share resources and everything. Is I think it's a really great episode to start at, which I think is episode 96. If someone wanted to jump in on
There
that
you
one,
have it,
so
guys. Episode
that was
96.
a
Now,
hard one because
yeah,
there's
now
so
you know
many
where to.
good ones.
Yeah. Now you know where to start. Now you know where to start. Episode 96. Alec Wants, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Peter, for what you're doing. I really appreciate it for having me here.
Of course.